All right, so I'm trying out something new. If this does well and you guys enjoy this, I'll do another one for another conference. But I wanted to give you guys every SEC team's breakout player for the 2021 college football season. I would be choosing one player who I think will break out for every single team in this conference. And this was really tough to do because, there's so many players that always are transferring in, coming in. You have new recruits and whatnot. So there's so many players to choose from for every team, but I just pick one. If there are some players who you guys feel could break out, let me know down in the comment section down below if you guys are watching this on YouTube. And remember that this is a JT Sports Podcast. Every segment or video that's uploaded on the channel is available in audio format on every single podcasting platform. Wherever you get your podcast from, the JT Sports Podcast is available. So make sure that you guys go ahead and check out the JT Sports Podcast. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can check it out down in the description down below and in the pinned comment. So let's start off with Georgia. I have wide receiver / tight end Arik Gilbert. He transferred to the University of Georgia last year. He formerly was part of LSU's football program, and then he ended up entering the transfer portal. And then it was kind of weird because he initially transferred to Florida. Then I guess he wasn't eligible to play, so then he transferred to Georgia, and then he didn't play last year due to personal reasons. But this is a dude. And when I say a dude, this is a dude. He's 6'5", 248 pounds. He is the highest ranked tight end in 24/7 Sports composite history. He was the 5th ranked player nationally coming out of the 2020 recruiting class. He was a 5-star recruit. And in the long season that he played with the LSU Tigers in 2020, he caught 34 or 35 passes for 368 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns and averaged 10.5 yards per reception. During the spring game, I saw him catch a touchdown. He's playing wide receiver. They just had to find a way to get him on the field because they already have a pretty phenomenal tight end. So when you look at Arik Gilbert, you definitely see a Kyle Pitts clone. The dude is a freak athlete. If he was to run the 40-yard dash right now, I'm pretty sure he would at least run a 4.4. I would be really surprised if he ran anything slower than a 4.5. This is a freak athlete. This is one of the freakiest athletes, and not just the SEC, but in all of college football. And he is about to light up the whole entire SEC this year. This dude is going to go off. He is a monster. For Kentucky, I have cornerback Carrington Valentine. He's 6 foot, 200 pounds. He is a junior. He started in 12 games for the Wildcats last season. He had 61 tackles and 5 pass deflections. He currently is the most experienced cornerback on Kentucky's roster at the moment. He played the second most snaps on the Wildcats defense in 2021, over 900 snaps. He should be Kentucky's best corner this year, and he has potential to become one of the best cornerbacks in this conference. For Tennessee, I have Brew McCoy. Former 5-star recruit. He was the 9th ranked player coming out of the 2019 recruiting cycle. He didn't play last season due to some off-the-field issues, but during his 2020 campaign for the Trojans, he caught 21 receptions for 236 receiving yards, 2 touchdowns. He's 6'3", 220 pounds, I believe. He's built similar to a running back. He's really hard to bring down in the open field. The dude is really, really physically gifted. And I think that he's going to be a very great fit in Josh Heupel's offense. And him and Cedric Tillman could end up being one of the best wide receiver duos in the SEC if he ends up playing up to expectations. A big reason why he transferred to Tennessee was because he liked Josh Heupel's offense. He felt he would be a good fit. He also loves the Tennessee fan base. He transferred in and he felt right at home. And during his visit, he came in and just felt that Tennessee was the right place for him to play ball at. With Hendon Hooker throwing him passes this year, there's no reason why he shouldn't end up being able to break out for the Vols this upcoming college football season. For Missouri, We have wide receiver Luther Burden the third. I think he's probably the only true freshman that I have on this list. He's 5'11", 210 pounds. Hailing from St. Louis, he was a 5-star recruit and the #1 wide receiver from this past year's recruiting cycle from the 2022 class. He has phenomenal ball skills. He plays way bigger than his height. He routinely is able to win 50-50 balls down the field. On top of that, he is phenomenal after the catch. He has great speed, quickness, elusiveness. And not only can he make you miss, but he can also run through you as well. This is truly a all-around gifted wide receiver. And he's a rare breed because oftentimes you are rarely going to find in this day and age somebody who's 5'11" but plays as if they're 6'4". Not only that, but he can create in an open field. If you go back and you watch Missouri spring game, they would just force feeding him the ball at times. There were times where the quarterback would throw it up to him anyway, despite the fact that he wasn't open. Missouri's going to find a way to get this kid the ball. And the fact that he's going to be starting as a true freshman says just how talented he is, because Missouri has a pretty good group of wide receivers. This is one of the deepest wide receiving cores in all of college football. So the fact that he's starting right away tells you just how good he's going to be. And don't be surprised if you end up seeing him end up being a freshman All-American, not just for this conference, but in college football. I think that he's going to be special, and I expect him to be a future first-round pick in the next couple of years. The dude is an absolute monster. He was lining up in the backfield catching passes. Missouri also had him playing on the outside and in the slot as well. He actually caught a touchdown when he was coming out of the slot. So he can move around the offense, and not only that, but he can just do so many things. And I think that he is going to have one of the best true freshman seasons that we've seen out of a wide receiver in a very long time. For South Carolina, running back Marshawn Lloyd is my breakout player for the Gamecocks. He's 5'9", 212 pounds. Last season, he had 64 carries for 228 rushing yards. He had a touchdown and was averaging 3.6 yards per attempt. He was still working off the rust. According to Shane Beamer, he wasn't 100% because he was coming back from an ACL injury that he had suffered the year prior. And with running backs Kevin Harris and Zakondre Wright leaving for the NFL, I think Lloyd should be able to take over as the lead back this year. Even though he is going to have Wake Forest transfer Christian Bill Smith eating at some of his carries, I still think that he should end up being the best running back on this offense. Beamer has raved about him during spring, and then on top of that, during the spring game, he said that it's his time. Pretty much it's his time to take over. He's a powerful runner, but don't let that fool you. Even though he's kind of viewed as a power back, he's really shifty, has really quick feet, and every time he's going down, he fights for extra yardage. He's able to pick up yards in the phone booth, as they say. So I'm really excited about what he can do. Coming out of high school, he was the 5th ranked running back in the nation, according to 247 Sports. So this dude is a freak. Not only that, but if South Carolina is going to end up having a 8-win or more season this year, they're going to have to get more production out of the run game, because the run game last year definitely could have been a little bit better. And the offensive line also was a little bit of a factor, but the offensive line has definitely improved. It's way better this year compared to what it was going into the 2021 college football season. And with having a better offensive line, I think that you could see Marshawn Lloyd become one of the best running backs in the SEC during the 2022 college football season. For Florida, you guys already know who we have. Quarterback Anthony Richardson, 6'4", 237 pounds. He is going to be a huge part in determining how successful Florida's new head coach, Billy Napier, is going to be in his first year as the head man of the Gators. He appeared in 8 games as a redshirt freshman last year. He was part of SEC's all-freshman team. He has already been projected to get picked in the top 10 of next year's NFL draft. Todd McShay had him going to the Carolina Panthers, 6th overall, in his way to early 2023 mock draft. PFF also ranks him as a top 5 quarterback prospect going into the upcoming college football season. Even though we haven't seen a lot of Anthony Richardson, we only have a small sample size to go off. When you seen him play last year, the dude was magical. And I'm not trying to be disrespectful. As a matter of fact, let me not say that. I'm just going to say that every time he's on the field, something magical happens. The dude just knows how to make plays. Last year, he completed 59.4% of his passes, threw for 529 passing yards, had 6 touchdowns to 5 interceptions. He also ran for 401 rushing yards and had 3 rushing touchdowns. And on top of that, he's going to be throwing to a pretty good group of wide receivers. You have Xavier Henderson and Justin Shorter. You also have an offensive line that should be pretty decent this year. Many people, I think, are kind of overlooking Florida this year. Yeah, they do have Anthony Richardson, but this offense is a little bit more talented than what some people are giving them credit for. There are many people out there who think that the Gators just don't have no talent at all. That's not true. They have some ballers on this team. And I think that with Henderson and Shorter, they're going to end up being elevated by Anthony Richardson. And I think that Anthony Richardson is going to ball out, and he's definitely going to be the main focal point of this team's success. And if he ends up having a very good year, expect Florida to be an 8-9 win team maybe. For Vanderbilt, we have cornerback Jalen Mahoney. He is a senior DB. Last year for the Commodores, he had 52 tackles, 3rd on the team. He also had 2 interceptions, 3 pass deflections, 2 sacks, a forced fumble, a fumble recovery, and had 4.5 tackles for loss. He started all 12 games for Vanderbilt last season. He plays with good anticipation, does a nice job of fighting to get off blocks, and he's a really good tackler, which is something that you can't really say in this day and age of football, because most cornerbacks or DBs that you see, they pick and choose when they want to get involved and try to tackle. But for Mahoney, he is pretty consistent, and I definitely expect him to be drafted in next year's NFL draft. And I think he's already one of the best cornerbacks in the SEC. I would consider him to be a top 50 cornerback in college football heading into this season. And he's really underrated. Not too many people know about him because it's Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt is one of the worst Power 5 programs in America. So, of course, I doubt many of you guys watching this are really pay attention to Vanderbilt football. But Jalen Mahoney, he definitely should catch your eye whenever your favorite SEC team, such as Georgia, Alabama, maybe plays Vanderbilt. You're probably going to see his name called a lot, making plays. I think he's going to end up being a household name by the end of this year. If you are a diehard football fan and you just love covering the NFL draft and whatnot, Jalen Mahoney is definitely going to be somebody who you're going to end up getting accustomed to hearing his name. For Alabama, this was really tough, man, but I had to take my guy Kool-Aid McKinstry. I could have put Jermaine Burton, Ja'Cory Brooks, or Jahmyr Gibbs on this list, even though I don't think Jahmyr Gibbs would qualify for a list like this because he was arguably the best player in the ACC last year. But, I mean, not too many people know how good he is because he played at Georgia Tech. I don't think too many people are paying attention to Georgia Tech football nationally, but I went with my guy Kool-Aid because, come on, man, you really think I was going to miss a chance to say the name Kool-Aid McKinstry? Come on, man, this is my favorite player in the SEC already. His name is Kool-Aid, and his legal name is JaQuincy McKinstry, but in an interview in 2019 that he did with AL.com, he said that it's a pet name that his grandmother gave him at birth because he came out smiling, and ever since then, he's been telling people to call him Kool-Aid. He also has an NIL deal with, guess who? Kool-Aid. Imagine that. Your name's Kool-Aid, and you have an NIL deal with Kool-Aid. It's so crazy. And last year, Despite the fact that he didn't start, he did get a good amount of playing time as a true freshman. He had 26 tackles, 1 sack, 1 interception, and a pass deflection. He was selected to the freshman All-SEC team last year. He was a 5-star recruit, the #1 cornerback coming out of the 2021 recruiting class, according to 247 Sports. I think that him and Elias Ricks are going to end up being the best cornerback duo in all of college football this year. And if you don't know who Kool-Aid McKinstry is, I promise you he's probably going to be a household name by week 6 or week 5 of the college football season, because this is a name that you're not going to forget. And I'm really upset. And let me tell you why I'm upset real quick before we move on to the next one. Let me vent. We just got robbed of potentially one of the greatest rivalries in sports. We could have had Kool-Aid McKinstry versus the coldest Crawford. LSU had a wide receiver named the coldest, right? And he was committed to LSU. But I guess when they decided to part ways with Ed Orgeron, he ended up flipping to Nebraska. And it really made me upset, because we could have had Kool-Aid versus the coldest. Think about that. Think about how many memes could have been made out of that, man. The coldest versus Kool-Aid. Now, we still have a chance of it happening if Nebraska is able to make it to a New Year's Six bowl game and LSU or Alabama loses a couple of ball games this year, or somehow, if there's a God, Nebraska ends up making it to the college football playoffs this year and playing Alabama. That would be crazy, but I just have to see it. I have to see Kool-Aid McKinstry line up against the coldest Crawford. I need to see it. I have to see it. I'm really upset that we got robbed out of that matchup. Shame on you, Brian Kelly. Shame on you. You should have made sure that you got the coldest to LSU. You should have. I'm really upset about that, but on to the next player. I just had to vent that. For Ole Miss, running back Zach Evans, he's a transfer from TCU. He was a 5-star coming out of the 2020 class, hailing from the Houston area. He decided to stay close to home and commit to TCU. He had a really crazy recruiting process. It was really crazy, really entertaining. He was the 16th ranked player nationally and the second best running back from that class, according to 24/7. And last year for TCU, he had 92 carries, 648 rushing yards, 5 touchdowns, averaged 7 yards per attempt. Not only last year, but his true freshman season as well. He was averaging 7.7 yards per carry. He also had 10 receptions, 130 receiving yards, and 1 touchdown. And when you look at how his career went with the Horned Frogs, he was held back by injuries, but he probably could have been utilized a little bit more in the passing game. And with him going to Lane Kiffin, he's definitely going to find a way to maximize all of this phenomenal running back's abilities. He has good speed, balance, acceleration. He changes directions flawlessly while still being able to maintain his top speed. He also has very good hands as well. And with Lane Kiffin being his head coach, he's definitely going to figure out a way to get him heavily involved in the passing game. He kind of reminds me a little bit of Alvin Kamara, and there are a good amount of Ole Miss fans who have also given him that comparison, and I understand why. Because when you look at the similarities between him and Kamara, they both have that ability to kind of be able to change directions while still being able to maintain top-end speed. They also have pretty good balance. But a big knock that some people had on him was that for some reason that he kept running out of bounds and whatnot. I don't think he's scared of contact, anything like that. That's a dumb narrative. It's just that he was near the sidelines. You get what I'm saying? I mean, what do you want to do? Run back in and lose some yards? Kind of made no sense. But I'm really excited about Zach Evans. There are a good amount of people who are excited about Zach Evans. Him and Jahmyr Gibbs, man, are probably going to be the 2 highlight backs from the SEC this year that everybody's going to be looking at their highlights and they're just going to be going, wow. And then another thing with Zach Evans is hopefully he can stay healthy, because injuries also, as I mentioned earlier, have been something that kind of held him back at TCU. So if he can stay fully healthy, I think that he's going to end up being a phenomenal pickup for Ole Miss alongside of transfer quarterback Jackson Dart from USC. I'm really excited to see what Zach Evans can do. He definitely has potential to be one of the best running backs in college football. For Arkansas, we have Alabama transfer Drew Sanders, who comes in on this list. He's 6'5", 244 pounds. In 2021, with the Crimson Tide, he had 24 tackles, 1 sack, 2.5 tackles for loss, and 2 pass deflections. He started in 3 games for Alabama in replace of injured linebacker Christopher Allen, but he later would suffer an injury himself. And he missed a couple of games, and by the time he came back, Dallas Turner had already kind of took over that role. You guys already know what it is at Alabama. Every time somebody ends up having to step out for injuries, there's always somebody else coming in and producing. They're just a football factory over there. They produce players like it's machines on the conveyor belt. But this is a linebacker who is really athletic. He played all over the field. When he was in high school, he played quarterback, tight end, wide receiver, multiple spots on the defensive side of the ball. He was a 26th ranked athlete coming out of that 2020 recruiting cycle. The dude is phenomenal, great speed. He has potential to become one of the best linebackers in this conference, and not only one of the best linebackers in this conference, but when you look at him, this is definitely a prototypical NFL linebacker, especially if he has a little bit of coverage ability. I think he can end up being a potential first round, second round pick when he ends up declaring for the draft in the next couple of years. For Mississippi State, wide receiver Jaden Walley comes in on this list. He is a junior. He had a phenomenal true freshman campaign in 2020. He was part of the SEC's all freshman team. He broke all kinds of freshman records for Mississippi State. 4 100-yard receiving games. The first freshman with back-to-back 100-yard receiving games. In 2021, last year, he had 55 receptions for 628 receiving yards and 6 touchdowns. With Mekhi Polk leaving for the NFL, Walley should definitely become the team's number 1 and be Will Rogers' go-to wide receiver. And I think he can end up being a top 3 wideout in this conference. I'm really excited about him. Good hands. I think he does possess pretty good ability after the catch. I'm excited for what he can do this year. And then Mike Leach's air raid offense, his numbers are definitely going to be inflated. So he's definitely going to end up being one of the top producers in the country just because of the volume that he probably will receive in the passing game this year. And Will Rogers is kind of underrated. I might have to make a separate video on Will Rogers because I don't think too many people understand how good Will Rogers is. For Texas A&M, defensive lineman Shamar Turner, man, this dude is the definition of a freak. I was talking about dudes. This is a dude. He's 6'4", 285 pounds. He had a phenomenal spring. He can move, man. He can move. We were raving about Jordan Davis and how impressive his 40 time was, despite the fact that he's 340 pounds running what he ran. But if Shamar Turner was to run a 40 right now, it definitely would turn a lot of heads because this dude can really move for his size. And on top of that, he has crazy twitch, and he can play inside, outside. You can move him all over the defensive line. He has all kinds of potential to be a dominant pass rusher. Not only that, but he's also already a really good run stopper, and expect him to be in the conversation at the end of the season for one of the best defensive linemen in college football with his ability to take over games. And on top of that, Texas A&M already has a stout defensive line full of more highly touted players coming out of high school and whatnot. But Shamar Turner, I think he's probably going to be the best of the bunch. I'm expecting him to have a breakout year. He could have 8 to 9 sacks. And on top of that, probably have a lot of havoc plays when he's getting a lot of tackles behind the line of scrimmage and just disrupting game plans. It's going to be really hard to run on this Texas A&M front this season. And I think that Shamar Turner is going to be the anchor of that defensive line. His freshman year, he was part of the coach's freshman all-SEC team. He had 14 tackles, 1.5 sacks, with him getting increased playing time with the departure of DeMarvin Leal, who's now on the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's going to end up coming into that role, replacing him, and the dude is going to be lights out this year. I'm glad I'm not playing running back in the SEC, because if I saw Shamar Turner, I might think a little bit twice about trying to run by him, because that dude is a freak athlete, man. For Auburn, we have Oregon transfer cornerback DJ James. Last year for the Ducks, he had his best season of his collegiate career, 46 tackles, 4 pass deflections, 2 interceptions. He should be a great replacement for cornerback Roger McCreary, who just got drafted not too long ago in this past year's NFL draft. Look at DJ James. I think that he's going to be a big part of that Auburn secondary this year, a secondary that many people have a little bit of questions about when it comes to talent and whatnot, but I think DJ James is going to be a good anchor in that secondary. I think he should end up becoming one of the best cornerbacks in this conference this year, and with him playing on the West Coast, he didn't really get too much attention nationally, but I think that this is probably one of the more underrated transfers from the transfer portal over the course of this offseason. So keep an eye out for him. And the last player that we have for LSU is cornerback Mekhi Garner. He is a transfer from Louisiana Lafayette. He was a 2-year starter for the Raging Cajuns. He was one of the better cornerbacks in the G5 last year. He's 6'2", 215 pounds, so he has phenomenal size for a corner. Third team All Sun Belt in 2021. Last year, he recorded 31 tackles, a forced fumble, and 8 pass deflections. And this is a LSU secondary that I think is pretty good. They got a pretty good amount of transfers from the transfer portal. I expect Mekhi Garner to end up becoming one of the best cornerbacks in this conference and potentially one of the better cornerbacks in all of college football, because the dude has really good size. He has really good technique as well. And he's just somebody who has gotten better every single year during his time under Billy Napier when he was a head coach for the Raging Cajuns before he left for Florida. So expect him to take a major step this year in his development and end up being one of the best corners in college football potentially. So this is it for my breakout players for every SEC team. I only did one. For Alabama, I probably could have named about 3 or 4, but could only stick with one. So you guys let me know some players that you think will break out. Also, let me know some other conferences that you guys would like me to do if you guys enjoyed this. And I appreciate you guys for listening in on this episode of the JT Sports Podcast. Remember that the JT Sports Podcast is available on all podcasting platforms: Google Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts from. The JT Sports Podcast is available. And I appreciate you guys for listening to this episode of the JT Sports Podcast.